There's a lot of talk nowadays about rights, and have you ever actually stopped and taken a moment and thought about what is a right and what does that mean? Well, we'll do that next on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel with the Constitution Study here, where we read and study the Constitution and teach the rising generation to be free. And we're here with another Ponder This episode. We're going to ponder today rights. I don't mean rights as opposed to left. I mean the idea of what are rights. And I've actually done a whole episode on this, and so I don't want to cover ground we've already covered, but I want to take a few minutes and just kind of stop and think about rights. If a right is something that we are owed, if a right is something that we are, certain rights we are endowed by our Creator, there are alienable versus unalienable rights, there are positive versus negative rights. But I want to take some time and ponder the part of rights I think is most important, and that is the legitimate exercise of those rights. See, I propose that the only legitimate exercise of a right cannot infringe on the right of another. All right? So for a right to be legitimate, it must be legitimately exercised. And we get into that question of, well, how do I know what a right is? And how do I know, well, this right versus that right? And I've kind of boiled this down to this idea of, well, okay, then for me to legitimately exercise a right, it cannot infringe on the rights of another. And I want to give you two examples. One example I'm sure you've all heard, it's the crying fire in a crowded theater, which, contrary to popular belief, is not outlawed, but was not found to be unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. In fact, head over to the website, constitutionstudy.com. You can find the article I did on, I think it's expanding on what is a right, and find out more, understand the basis of the actual Supreme Court ruling. But let's ask that question. Okay, so I walk into a theater, you walk into a theater, and you cry fire. Well, one of two things has to happen. Either there actually is a fire and your crying of fire is an alert to the people that are there that there's a fire in the building and they probably ought to do something about it. Or there is no fire and what you're doing is a lie. Okay, let's take the first. If there actually is a fire and you go into a crowded theater and cry fire, have you infringed on anybody's rights? No, you're informing them of a potentially dangerous, potentially life-threatening situation that they should pay attention to. So that's not an infringement of their rights. So there's that's a legitimate use of my free speech, that I should be able to walk into a theater and cry fire. But what about the situation where there is no fire? You see, now I have infringed on their rights. You see, there's a group of people that have gathered to see whatever is going on in the theater. It could be a movie, could be a play, whatever it is. And by crying fire and initiating logically an exodus to the exits, I've infringed on their right to peaceably assemble. I've prevented them from peaceably assembling. In addition, I've violated the rights of the property owner by infringing on his ability to do business. The business owner, right? Because I've infringed on their ability to do business. I've potentially infringed on people's rights by initiating an action that caused them injury, possibly even death. So I've infringed on a lot of people's rights. So while I still have a right to speak freely, I have used it illegitimately. And I think we need to take the time and think about those things when people start talking about rights of free speech and rights of the press and all of our rights. But I want to put another thought out there while I'm at it. And that's a situation I've heard several times on a particular podcast I listen to. And that is where the right to keep and bear arms and where that can and cannot be exercised. And this one particular person, I won't name them because I don't have their permission. In their expressed opinion, their right to keep and bear arms supersedes the property rights of a business owner. In other words, if a business owner does not want firearms on their property, their rights are subservient to this person's right to carry a firearm. I disagree. You see, I trust me, I believe in the right to keep and bear arms. I'm wholeheartedly behind that. In fact, some people say maybe a little too wholeheartedly behind it. But if I use my right to supersede the right of another, to infringe on the right of another, that is an illegitimate use of my right. So let's flip it around. Let's say you're the property owner. Somebody comes on to your property and you don't want them to be carrying a firearm. That's your right. They cannot, if they want to come onto your property, these are part of the requirements as a property owner is that no, you leave your firearm at the door or whatever rule you set up. You're not infringing on their rights because you're not requiring them to come onto your property. You're not forcing them to come onto your property. Say you're a store owner. You put up a big sign in the window with that, firearm symbol and the red circle and slash, and you say, I don't want firearms. You're not infringing on their rights because you're not forcing them to do business with you. That is their choice. They have to decide what is more important to them, doing business with you or carrying their firearm in your shop. They make a rational decision and then deal with the consequences. The flip side of that is if they say that sign doesn't matter and they bring their firearm anyway, now they're going to infringe on your rights to exercise their own. If they were the property owner, would they feel the same way? I'm not so sure. I can't say for sure because I'm not in their head, but I'm not so sure they would feel the same way. So you see this logical idea of that the legitimate exercise of a right ends when I infringe on the rights of another helps put a lot of situations into context. We get into questions of capital punishment, self-defense, warrants, reasonable searches and seizures. We start, these words that may be a little vague start making a lot more sense when we're looking at, is the exercise of my right an infringement on somebody else's right? Which gets us into a lot of these things like the so-called right to health care, the so-called right to free education, the so-called right to a living wage, and on and on and on and on. None of these can be legitimately exercised. That's why I call them so-called rights. There is no way for you to have a right to not be offended, because the only way for you to not be offended is for you to control the speech and writings of other people. That's an infringement of their right. In fact, the First Amendment says you can't do that. It protects the right of people to speak. It protects the right of people to publish information that you find offensive. There's not much need to protect speech that people don't find offensive. The right to free anything, right? Healthcare, education, living wage, all require somebody else to do something for you. You have to infringe on their right to their time, their right to the property, their right to themselves, their right to the proceeds of their labor. That's all infringement on their right. Now, would I love to get a lot of free stuff? I'm human. I love free stuff. But does that mean I have a right to that free stuff? I think if we stop and think about so much of what's going on in politics and the media in Washington and our state capitals, if we started having conversations with our elected representatives about, have you thought about what this really means? When you say we're going to take from this person, you're talking about taking something they've earned. Is that a legitimate exercise of someone's right? When we're talking about SOGI laws, when we're talking about some of these transgender naming convention ordinances, we're talking about controlling how people think, how people speak, how people write. That's not liberty. That's tyranny. When we are trying to make other people act the way we want, we are infringing on their rights. I don't care how justified you feel in exercising your right. If you're using it to infringe on someone else's, what you're doing is illegitimate. And maybe if we thought about that a little bit more, maybe some of these infringements on our rights would not be so prevalent nowadays. I don't know. That's kind of where my head at. That's what I think when the question of rights comes up. My first thought is the exercise of a person's right infringing on the rights of someone else? So again, I'm trying out this ponder this section. I think it's kind of interesting. It's the way my mind works. Put in the comments. Let me know. Do you like this? Do you not like this? If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell. Let me know that you're going to follow what I'm saying here. On Facebook, you can follow the page, constitutionstudy.com. You can listen to the audio on Apple Podcast and Google Music. And if you have something you'd like me to ponder, you'd like all of us sit down and ponder for a little bit, stick it in the comments section. Let me know. I've gotten a lot of good questions through comments on the website, comments on the podcast. Again, head over to constitutionstudy.com. Follow me. Let me know what you think, and follow where I'm going to be. I'm going to be in Nashville the end of this month, end of March. And if you're going to be there, I hope to see you there. Make sure you let me know you show up. I hope this was worth your time. I hope you enjoyed pondering this. Most of all, I hope I'll see you again the next time on the Constitution Study. Have a great day.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from